did a fleeting glimpse shatter your carefully built peace? It's funny how a single, fleeting glimpse can unravel years of carefully constructed peace. Most mornings, my commute on the 7:15 express bus to downtown felt like a comfortable purgatory, just enough mundane routine to keep the bigger, uglier thoughts at bay. But this morning, as the bus pulled away from the stop on Elm and Main, I saw her. Just a profile, really, through the grimy window of a passing city bus going the other way. Long dark hair, pulled back into a severe bun, and a set to her jaw I recognized instantly. My stomach seized, a cold, hard knot forming right where my breakfast should have been. My guilt, it turns out, wasn't something that faded with time, but a patiently coiled snake, waiting for just such a moment to strike. I knew with absolute certainty that my quiet, unassuming existence was about to come crashing down. For the past 3 years, my life had been a meticulously choreographed dance of avoidance and routine. After everything, I'd moved across the state, taken a low-stress job and account reconciliation numbers, blessed them, rarely held grudges, and rented a tiny, sunless apartment that felt more like a monastic cell than a home. It was enough. It was safe. I was Judith Nelson, 57F, and I was, to my mind, a ghost. I passed, and the terrible choices that had led me here were meant to stay buried. My current reality was a steady rhythm of coffee, bus rides, spreadsheets, and early nights. The city's hum was a constant, soothing white noise, drowning out the echoes of what I'd left behind. My sister, Claire Stewart, 57F, would have a field day with my current setup. Claire, with her perfectly coiffed blonde bob and her designer power suits, always believed in upward trajectories. She had 2 Ivy League degrees, a corner office overlooking the financial district in a city an hour's train ride away, and a husband who still sent her flowers every Friday. She was the embodiment of having it all, and in our family, she had always been the golden child, the one who effortlessly excelled at everything from advanced calculus to convincing our mother that her terrible meatloaf was, in fact, rustic. Relationship was a complex tapestry of admiration, envy, and a deep, unspoken understanding that we were fundamentally different species. Lately, it had been mostly long silences and terse texts. She knew I'd left my old life in a hurry, knew it involved my ex-husband in something messy, but I had kept the real, truly damning details under wraps. Claire was a problem solver, a fixer. And some things I knew couldn't be fixed. Not by her, and certainly not by me. Last time I'd seen Claire in person, about 6 months ago, she'd come to my apartment for what she called an intervention. She'd brought a casserole she'd bought from a gourmet deli and a list of online dating sites. "Judith," she'd begun, setting the casserole down with a thud that echoed in my sparse living room, "you can't just evaporate. This isn't living. You're hiding. What happened with Robert, it was awful, yes, but you need to process it. You need to move on." She meant well, I knew. But her words felt like sandpaper on a raw wound. Robert was, admittedly, a huge part of the reason I was here, but not the whole reason. Not the reason for the cold knot in my stomach. I just nodded, feigning agreement, and then changed the subject to her recent promotion, which worked like a charm. Claire loved talking about her achievements. The bus lurched, pulling me out of my reverie. Woman I'd seen, she was too far away to be sure, and the light was bad, but the sheer visceral reaction it had was enough. It was a phantom punch to the gut. The memory of the court documents, the police reports, the headlines, they flashed behind my eyes. I gripped the worn strap of my tote bag, my knuckles white. My palms felt clammy and a trickle of sweat ran down my spine despite the air conditioning. It was happening. After all this time, the past was finally catching up. I spent the rest of the ride trying to rationalize it away. It couldn't have been her. The city was huge. There were millions of people. But the feeling persisted, a dull throb of dread. I got off at my usual stop, the rush hour crowd swallowing me whole, each face a blur. The concrete canyon of the financial district felt oppressive today, the towering glass buildings reflecting a distorted, accusatory sky. My office on the 12th floor of a building that looked like every other glass box offered little solace. I went through the motions of logging in, checking emails, opening spreadsheets. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed, my mind replaying that fleeting image. Mid-morning, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. I hesitated, then opened it. It was just an advertisement for a local grocery store, a coupon for artisanal cheese. I let out a shaky breath, feeling both relief and a strange disappointment. I was almost wishing for the confrontation just to get it over with. The waiting was agony. At lunch, I usually ate at my desk, but today I needed air, needed to move. I grabbed a dry sandwich from the deli downstairs and headed to the small park nearby. The park was always bustling with office workers, students, and a few regulars who seemed to have made it their permanent home. I found a bench under a sickly-looking oak tree and unwrapped my sandwich, trying to focus on the sounds of the city, the distant wail of sirens, the murmur of conversations. That's when I saw her again. This time, there was no mistaking it. She was sitting on another bench, perhaps 30 feet away, her back to me. The same severe bun, the same slightly slumped shoulders, a worn, dark coat. Her profile, as she turned to watch a group of pigeons peck at crumbs, was unmistakable. Judy Walker, 56F, my former colleague, the one I had last seen in a courthouse, her face etched with a desolation I hadn't been able to bear. I froze, the sandwich half raised to my mouth. My blood ran cold, then hot, a wave of nausea washing over me. Judy, here in this city. How, why, she was supposed to be here. She was supposed to be somewhere else, somewhere far away from me. My mind raced, trying to put the pieces together. Last I'd heard, she'd been living with her sister in a small town upstate. A quiet life, that's what she'd wanted. 1,000 questions screamed in my head, but one rose above the rest. What did she know? And what was she doing here now? I watched her, my breath catching in my throat. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a small, worn paperback book, and began to read, oblivious to my presence. Sight of her, so close, so real, brought back the entire rot memory, not in flashes, but as a full, horrifying replay. It had all started so innocently, or so it seemed at the time. A small-time tech startup, a handful of us pouring our lives into it, dreaming of hitting it big. Robert, my ex-husband, had been the CEO. Charming, charismatic, with a silver tongue that could sell ice to an Eskimo. He brought me in as his head of operations, and Judy, a quiet, brilliant software engineer, had been an early hire. We were a team, a family, or so Id thought. The problem started subtly. Robert's increasingly lavish lifestyle, the delayed paychecks for some employees, the vague answers about funding. I'd seen the red flags, dismissed them as entrepreneurial growing pains. He was my husband, after all. I trusted him. Blindly, stupidly. Judy, always the meticulous one, had been the first to voice concerns. She'd come to me quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, clutching a printout of discrepancies in the company's financial records. "Judith," Shed said, her eyes wide with worry, "I think there's something wrong. The revenue figures don't align with the user growth, and these invoices, they look fabricated." I remember the conversation with vivid, agonizing clarity. We're in the cramped break room, the smell of burnt coffee in the air. My first instinct was to dismiss it to protect Robert. He was under so much pressure, I'd told myself. He wouldn't do anything illegal. But Judy laid out the evidence, piece by painstaking piece, her voice shaking with each revelation. She showed me shell companies, transactions that made no sense, money funneled out of investor accounts into hidden personal accounts. My stomach had dropped, cold and heavy. It wasn't just sloppy accounting. It was fraud, major fraud. My hands had begun to tremble, sweat beading on my forehead. I had a choice then, a clear, stark choice. I could have gone to the authorities with Judy. We had the evidence. We could have stopped it. But Robert had been my husband, the father of my children, even if they were grown and out of the house. The thought of destroying his life, of facing that public humiliation, of losing everything, it was too much, so I did nothing. I told Judy I'd look into it, that I'd talk to Robert. I stalled, I equivocated. I pretended to be shocked and dismayed while internally I was crumbling. I tried to convince myself that Robert would come clean, that he'd fix it. He didn't. He couldn't. He was too far in. Eventually, Judy, with her quiet integrity, went to the authorities herself, after giving me one last, pleading look that still haunts my dreams. She tried to warn me, to save me. But I was still caught in Robert's web, believing his lies, too afraid to admit the truth to myself, let alone to anyone else. When the legal action finally came, it was swift and brutal. The company imploded. Robert was arrested, then indicted. Judy was hailed as a whistleblower, but her life was still upended. The shame, the harassment, the constant media scrutiny, she had lost everything too, including her career, her reputation, and her peace of mind. I, as Robert's wife and head of operations, was complicit. I wasn't charged, thanks to a very expensive lawyer Robert's family hired, who managed to paint me as an ignorant spouse, too naive to understand the complex financial machinations. A guilty bystander. That was the term they used. A bystander who had stood by and watched it all happen, knowing the truth, but doing nothing. The divorce from Robert was quick, fueled by mutual recriminations. Blamed me for not supporting him enough, for not believing in him. I blamed him for destroying my life. The house, the savings, my reputation all gone. My children, adults now, barely spoke to me, their shame palpable. I was financially ruined and emotionally shattered. Moving here, starting over, was my only option. My desperate attempt to outrun the ghost of my past. And now, here was that ghost, sitting on a park bench 30 feet away, reading a paperback. What was she doing in this city? Was it a coincidence? Or was she here for me? Was she going to expose me? The thought sent a jolt of pure panic through me. What would I say? How would I explain myself? My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat. My hands were still trembling, but now it was a full-body tremor. My vision swam. I needed to leave. Immediately, I couldn't face her. Not now, maybe not ever. I certainly couldn't face the questions, the accusations I knew would be in her eyes. I slowly, carefully began to gather my things, making sure not to make any sudden movements that might draw her attention. My half-eaten sandwich lay forgot. I stood up, my legs feeling like jelly, and began to inch away, trying to blend into the stream of pedestrians. Just as I thought I was clear, just as I was about to turn the corner out of the park, I heard a voice. A quiet voice, but one that cut through the city noise like a knife. "Judith?" My blood ran cold. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing. My shoulders hunched as if trying to shrink away to disappear. This was it. The moment I had dreaded for 3 years. I turned slowly, reluctantly, like a puppet on a string. Judy Walker was standing, looking at me. Her expression was unreadable, a strange mix of recognition and something else. Not anger, not immediate accusation, but a quiet, intense gaze that felt like it was stripping away all my carefully constructed defenses. It looked tired, older than her 56 years, but there was a flicker of resilience in her eyes that I remembered. "Judy," I managed, my voice a thin, reedy whisper I barely recognized as my own. My throat felt like sandpaper. I didn't expect to see you here." The lameness of my words hung in the air between us, a monument to my cowardice. She took a step closer, her book still clutched in her hand. "No," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I imagine you didn't." There was no bitterness in her tone, no overt hostility. But the weight of unspoken history of my failure settled heavily between us. "It's been a long time, Judith." I just nodded, unable to form a coherent sentence. My mind raced, searching for an escape, a plausible excuse, anything to avoid this inevitable confrontation. But there was nowhere to run. She was here, and I was here, and the past had finally caught up. "I moved here a few months ago," she continued, her gaze unwavering. "For a new job, Judy? The one whose career had been derailed, whose professional life had been decimated? This was news to me. It hinted at a recovery I hadn't imagined for her, a strength I hadn't possessed myself. "Oh," I mumbled, feeling utterly inadequate. That's good." My voice cracked. She took another step, closing the distance between us until we were only a few feet apart. Scent of her shampoo, faintly herbal, wafted towards me, a mundane detail that only served to make the surreal situation feel even more real. She didn't look away, and I found myself unable to meet her gaze for long, my eyes darting around, anywhere but her face. "Judith," she said again, her tone shifting slightly, a hint of something I couldn't quite decipher. "We need to talk." My heart hammered. This was it, the reckoning. I could feel the tremor in my hands spreading throughout my entire body. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to run, to invent an emergency, to disappear into the crowd. But some deep, uncomfortable part of me, the part that had carried the guilt for so long, knew this conversation was long overdue. It was a terrifying, suffocating thought. Talk, I finally managed, my voice barely audible. About what? The question was pointless, stupid. We both knew exactly what she meant. She didn't answer directly. Instead, her eyes narrowed slightly and she looked past me towards the street where a city bus the same kind I'd seen her on this morning rumbled past. Then she looked back at me, her expression hardening yet still devoid of outright anger. About everything, Judith. She paused, then added, her voice dropping almost a whisper, especially about the new development. It's escalating, and I think you need to know. New development? Escalating? My mind raced, trying to grasp what she could possibly mean. Or legal trouble? For Robert? For me? My chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. The ground beneath me seemed to tilt. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This was a direct, unavoidable path into a past I had desperately tried to bury, and it seemed to be bringing with it even more complications. I felt a cold dread settle deep in my bones, a terrifying certainty that my life, the one I had so carefully constructed from the rubble, was about to be obliterated once more. Judy Walker, the unexpected ally who I had failed so spectacularly, was standing before me, and her words suggested a fresh nightmare was just beginning. I could only stare at her, my mouth dry, utterly lost for words, knowing that whatever she was about to tell me, it would change everything. Talk, I finally managed, my voice barely audible. About what? The question was pointless, stupid. We both knew exactly what she meant. She didn't answer directly. Instead, her eyes narrowed slightly and she looked past me towards the street where a city bus the same kind I'd seen her on this morning rumbled past. Then she looked back at me, her expression hardening yet still devoid of outright anger. About everything, Judith. She paused, then added, her voice dropping almost a whisper, especially about the new development. It's escalating, and I think you need to know. New development? Escalating? My mind raced, trying to grasp what she could possibly mean. Or legal trouble? For Robert? For me? My chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. The ground beneath me seemed to tilt. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This was a direct, unavoidable path into a past I had desperately tried to bury, and it seemed to be bringing with it even more complications. I felt a cold dread settle deep in my bones, a terrifying certainty that my life, the one I had so carefully constructed from the rubble, was about to be obliterated once more. Judy Walker, the unexpected ally who I had failed so spectacularly, was standing before me, and her words suggested a fresh nightmare was just beginning. I could only stare at her, my mouth dry, utterly lost for words, knowing that whatever she was about to tell me, it would change everything. The murmur of the park, the distant sirens, the laughter of children, it all faded, replaced by the deafening drumbeat of my own fear. Judy's steady gaze was a physical weight, pressing down on me. I wanted to run, to scream, to curl into a ball and disappear, but her stillness held me captive. This wasn't the furious, accusing Judy I had imagined for years. This was a tired, resolute woman offering a hand I hadn't dared to hope for. What? What new development? I finally croaked, forcing the words out. Judy sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to carry years of burden. Robert, she began, and the name alone sent a fresh jolt through me. He's appealing his conviction. Not just that, he's claiming the original investigation was flawed, that crucial evidence was suppressed. He's saying I fabricated some of the initial claims to get out of a contract dispute with him. He's trying to discredit the entire whistleblower testimony. My jaw dropped. Fabricated? Judy, the quiet, scrupulously honest woman who had nearly destroyed her life for the truth? This was beyond audacious. This was a new level of depravity, even for Robert. Wouldn't, I whispered, though even as the words left my lips, I knew they were a lie. Of course he would, he was capable of anything. Oh, he would, Judy said, a flicker of something close to anger finally entering her eyes, quickly extinguished. He's desperate. He's facing a much longer sentence now, with new charges for related schemes that have come to light since the initial trial. Apparently, he's been running similar operations from prison, using proxies. The feds caught wind. This appeal is his last Hail Mary, and to succeed, he needs to tear down everyone involved in the original case. But that means you, I said, the implications slamming into me. He's targeting you again. She nodded, a grim line forming on her lips. And anyone else connected to the early days. He's trying to subpoena everyone who worked there, anyone who might have had access to the financials. He's claiming a conspiracy. Her gaze sharpened, fixing on me. He's claiming you were part of it too, not in the fraud itself, but in covering for him, in helping him discredit me when I first came forward. He's trying to paint you as his unknowing pawn who later became a disgruntled ex-wife, seeking revenge. He's trying to imply that you withheld information from the original investigators because you were complicit in my fabricated claims, not because you were innocent but ignorant. The world spun. My stomach churned. This was worse than I could have imagined. Robert wasn't just trying to get out of jail, he was trying to drag me down with him, to twist my past inaction into a malicious conspiracy. The label guilty bystander was about to be upgraded to accomplice. All my careful reconstruction, my anonymity, my quiet life, it was all about to be obliterated, not by my guilt alone, but by Robert's venomous desperation. What does he want? I stammered. He wants testimony, Judy explained, her voice remarkably calm considering the stakes. He wants to put us on the stand, make us contradict ourselves, create enough doubt to get a new trial. He's claiming I manipulated you, coerced you into not supporting him. He wants to make it look like our initial conversation, when I showed you the discrepancies, was me trying to rope you into a frame-up. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless. He was twisting the truth so grotesquely, making me out to be a pawn in a non-existent conspiracy, all to save his own skin. And the core of his claim that I didn't support him, that I was silent when I should have spoken, was true, just not in the way he intended. I had been silent because I was afraid, because I was complicit in my inaction, not because I was framing him. I can't, I breathed, shaking my head. I can't go through that again. The court, the questions, I can't. Judy took another step closer, reaching out a hand, then hesitating before letting it drop. I know, she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. I understand. But he's going to subpoena you, Judith. He's already trying to serve papers. I've been trying to find you before they do. You'll have no choice. Her words were a cold bucket of water over my head. No choice. That was the phrase that had defined my life for the past 3 years. But this time, it felt different. This time, there was an injustice to fight, not just a past to hide from. Robert was going to twist my inaction into active malice, and in doing so, he was going to destroy Judy again. And this time, I couldn't be a bystander. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice still shaky, but a new resolve beginning to stiffen my spine. Why not just let him bury me? I didn't help you last time. Judy met my gaze, and this time I didn't look away. Her eyes, though tired, held a surprising depth of understanding. Because, she said slowly, deliberately, you were afraid, Judith, not malicious. I saw that then, even if it frustrated me beyond belief. And because if he wins this, if he discredits me, then all the progress I've made, all the work I've done to put my life back together, it's gone. And I'm not going to let him do that. Not again. I need to fight this, and I need every shred of truth on my side. Truth, even the uncomfortable parts, can help. An unexpected ally. The phrase echoed in my mind. She wasn't here to accuse, but to enlist. She wasn't seeking revenge, but justice, and in doing so, she was offering me a chance for redemption. A difficult conversation indeed. It wouldn't just be with her, but with myself. What do you need me to do? I asked, the words feeling heavy but firm. A flicker of relief, subtle but undeniable, crossed Judy's face. My lawyer wants to meet with both of us. He needs to understand your perspective, your interactions with Robert and me, especially that conversation in the break room. He needs to know what you saw, what you knew, and why you didn't act then. It will be painful, Judith. He'll ask hard questions, but it's the only way to counter Robert's narrative. I closed my eyes briefly, bracing myself. Image of the cramped break room, the smell of burnt coffee, Judy's trembling hands holding the damning printouts, it all came rushing back. To relive that, to articulate my cowardice to a stranger, to admit to my complicity, it was terrifying. But the alternative was worse. Letting Robert win, letting him destroy Judy again, and living with the knowledge that I had failed both of us twice. Okay, I said, opening my eyes and meeting her gaze. Okay, Judy, I'll do it. Just tell me when and where. Judy gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. Thank you, Judith. Really, this means a lot. She pulled a business card from her coat pocket, remarkably pristine despite her worn coat. This is my lawyer's contact. Call him tomorrow. He's expecting to hear from me tonight. I took the card, my fingers brushing hers. Her touch was brief, almost fleeting, but it sent a jolt through me. It was the first physical contact we'd had in years, a tiny bridge across a vast chasm of guilt and silence. I need to get back to work, I said, feeling suddenly drained yet strangely invigorated. But thank you for finding me, for telling me. We'll get through this, Judith, she said, her voice softer now, almost a promise. Together. She turned and walked back towards her bench, picking up her paperback. I watched her go, a million thoughts swirling in my head. My safe, sunless apartment, my spreadsheets, my carefully constructed routine, it was all a house of cards, and Robert had just blown on it. But this time, I wouldn't just watch it collapse. 2 weeks later, the tremors in my hands were less frequent, but the knot in my stomach remained. I had met with Judy's lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Sarah. The conversation had been as painful as expected, perhaps more so. Living the initial fraud, my fear, my cowardly inaction, confessing it aloud to a stranger, felt like peeling off layers of old, infected skin. Sarah had listened patiently, her gaze unwavering, jotting down notes. She hadn't judged me. Instead, she'd helped me untangle the legal jargon, explaining how Robert was trying to exploit the gray areas, the subtleties of my guilty bystander status. She stressed the importance of a clear, consistent narrative from both Judy and me. Your candidness about your initial reluctance, Judith, paradoxically strengthens Judy's case, she'd said. It shows you weren't part of some grand scheme to entrap Robert, but rather a woman caught in a terrible situation, making regrettable choices out of fear and misguided loyalty. That's a story a jury can believe. The difficult conversations hadn't ended there. I started meeting Judy for coffee every few days after work. Initially, it was just about the case, sharing information, coordinating details, discussing Sarah's advice. But slowly, tentatively, our conversations began to drift beyond legal strategy. She told me about her new job, a small tech firm focusing on ethical AI development. It's a complete change of pace, she'd explained, stirring sugar into her coffee. Smaller scale, but meaningful work. I needed to build something good again. She spoke of the struggles she'd faced after the old company collapsed, the blacklisting, the whispers, the immense financial strain. I lost everything, Judith. My apartment, my savings, my professional identity. For a while, I thought I'd never work in tech again. I spent a year doing temp work, anything to pay the bills. There was no self-pity in her voice, just a factual recitation of past hardship. "I'm so sorry, Judy," I'd blurted out one afternoon, the words feeling inadequate but genuine. "I should have listened, I should have helped you. I was so afraid of Robert, of losing my life, but I didn't think about what you were losing, what you were sacrificing." Judy had paused, her spoon clinking against the ceramic. She looked at me, really looked at me, and a flicker of the old hurt, the one I had feared for so long, finally surfaced. But it was fleeting, quickly replaced by something else, understanding. "It was a terrible time for everyone, Judith," she'd said quietly. "You were in a difficult position. I don't know what I would have done if I were in your shoes, married to him. I just knew I couldn't live with myself if I let it continue." She took a sip of her coffee. "What you're doing now, coming forward, facing this again, it takes courage, more than you think." Words, so devoid of the anger I'd expected for so long, were a balm and a challenge. She saw me not as a villain, but as a flawed human being who had made a bad choice out of fear, and who was now trying to rectify it. This shift in her perception, and my growing comfort in her presence, felt like a cautious thaw after a long, bitter winter. It was the beginning of seeing her not just as a victim of my inaction, but as a resilient individual with her own struggles and triumphs. In turn, I began to see myself not just as a guilty bystander, but as someone capable of growth and repair. A month had passed since that first encounter in the park. The legal proceedings were moving slowly, as legal proceedings always do. Robert's legal team was aggressive, filing motions, requesting endless discovery. Sarah assured us it was standard stalling tactics. My relationship with Judy, however, was evolving quickly. We had moved beyond just coffee meetings. Sometimes, we'd grab lunch together in the park, sitting on the same benches, discussing everything from the city's best cheap eats to the latest tech news. Judy even mentioned a new bus route that was more direct for her commute, a small detail that grounded our renewed connection in the mundane reality of our city lives. The public transportation setting, once a symbol of my anonymous hiding, now became a backdrop for an unexpected alliance. One evening, after a particularly grueling session with Sarah, where we'd gone over my proposed testimony in excruciating detail, Judy walked me to my bus stop. "You know," she said, looking up at the towering buildings, "this city feels different now. When I first moved here, it felt like just another place to hide to start over in obscurity. But now with this, and with you, it feels like a place where I can actually build something." I nodded, understanding completely. My own perspective had shifted dramatically. The city, which had felt like a cage, now felt like a crucible. I was being forged anew, not alone, but with an unexpected ally by my side. "There's something else, Judith," Judy said, hesitating, her gaze fixed on the street. "You mentioned your sister, Claire. She's quite successful, isn't she, in finance?" My stomach tightened. Claire, my overachieving sibling, my fixer. I hadn't told her about any of this. Our relationship was still strained, characterized by my avoidance and her well-meaning, but often suffocating attempts to help me. "Yes," I said cautiously. "She's very successful. Why do you ask?" Sarah suggested that if Robert's team tries to make a big deal out of your financial situation after the divorce, or paint you as someone who might have a grudge, Claire's testimony could be useful, Judy explained, turning to face me. "Not about the fraud directly, but about your character, your state of mind after everything fell apart. She knew Robert, didn't she? She knew your situation." My mind reeled. Claire, involved in this? The thought filled me with a fresh wave of dread. Claire would see this as another one of my messes, another sign of my inability to cope. She would judge, she would question, and she would try to take over. And then there was the embarrassment of explaining the full truth to her, not just about Robert, but about my knowing in action, my complicity. It was a bridge too far. "No," I said quickly, perhaps too quickly. "No, she can't be involved. She doesn't know the full extent of it, and she'd just worry she wouldn't understand." Judy looked at me, a gentle but firm challenge in her eyes. "Judith, this is about honesty. Robert is trying to spin a web of lies. You need to be transparent, even about the painful parts. If Claire can corroborate anything about your financial state, your trust in Robert, your shock when things came out, it could help." Sarah said a character witness, especially a family member who can speak to your integrity, could be invaluable. Her words echoed Sarah's earlier advice. The truth, even the uncomfortable parts, strengthened our case. And the uncomfortable truth was that Claire, for all her overbearing tendencies, was fiercely loyal. But my perception of her had always been that she was only capable of understanding success and competence, not failure and complicity. My own shame had built a wall between us. The bus pulled up, its brakes hissing. I'll think about it," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I need to go." I stepped onto the bus, my mind churning, leaving Judy standing there, her expression still unreadable. The next few days were a blur of internal debate. Could I really bring Claire into this? Could I expose my deepest shame to my perfect sister? The thought terrified me more than facing Robert's lawyers. But Judy's words and Sarah's kept returning. Transparency, truth, consistency. Robert was trying to exploit my silence, my fear of exposure. Claire, for all her flaws, knew me better than almost anyone. She knew the woman I was before Robert and the shell I became after. I decided it was time for another difficult conversation. I called Claire that evening. Her phone rang a few times before her crisp, professional voice answered. "Judith, to what do I owe the surprise? Everything all right?" "Claire," I began, taking a deep breath, "I need to talk to you. In person. It's important. It's about everything." There was a pause on the other end, a slight softening of her usually confident tone. "Everything? Judith, are you all right? Is it Robert again? You know I always said he was a snake." "It is about Robert, yes," I admitted, choosing my words carefully. "But it's more complicated than you know, and I need your help. Not your fixing, Claire, but your help. I need you to listen and then decide if you can be there for me." She hesitated again, then, surprisingly, her voice gentled. "All right, Judith. Take the train over this weekend. Just tell me when." The relief that washed over me was immense. She hadn't immediately gone into fix-it mode. She had heard the plea for help, for listening, not just solving. It was a tiny crack in the wall I'd built between us. 2 weeks later, Claire sat across from me in my small, sunless apartment. The same apartment she'd once called a monastic cell. This time, she hadn't brought a casserole or a list of dating sites. She simply sat, her impeccably manicured hands clasped in her lap, listening intently as I laid out the whole ugly truth. I started from the beginning, from Judy's initial warnings to my desperate attempts to rationalize Robert's behavior, to my fear-driven silence, my refusal to act, and finally, to Judy's decision to go to the authorities herself. I spoke of the shame, the guilt, the reason I'd cut myself off, not just from my old life, but from her. Explained Robert's appeal, his outrageous claims, and the need for me to face it all head-on with Judy to protect her and ourselves. I told her everything, leaving nothing out, including the term guilty bystander and my new terrifying understanding of what that truly meant. As I spoke, I watched Claire's face. The initial shock gave way to a furrowed brow, then a quiet thoughtfulness. I expected anger, judgment, disappointment. But as I finished, there was a profound silence in the room, and she slowly reached across the small coffee table and took my hand. Her touch was warm, comforting. "Judith," she said, her voice soft, devoid of its usual crispness. "Oh, Judith, why didn't you tell me? All these years. I knew something was deeply wrong, but I thought it was just the divorce, the financial ruin. I never imagined this." Her eyes were filled with a genuine sorrow, not for herself, but for me. "You carried this all alone, all that guilt. You thought I'd judge you, didn't you?" I nodded, tears pricking my eyes. "Yes, you were always so perfect, Claire. I couldn't bear to show you how completely I'd failed, how I'd watched someone else suffer because of my cowardice." Claire squeezed my hand. "Perfect?" She scoffed softly, a hint of bitterness in her tone. "Judith, I've spent my entire life trying to be perfect, trying to be what everyone expected. The golden child. It's exhausting. I've made my own share of mistakes, believe me, just not the kind that end up in court. What you did, you said you were afraid. Fear makes people do terrible things and it makes them do nothing. But you're here now, you're facing it, that's what matters." Then a flicker of her old Claire-ness returned, but tempered with a new understanding. "So, Robert wants to make you look like a co-conspirator to discredit Judy? And you need someone to vouch for your character, your financial situation, your state of mind when he was spinning his lies?" "Yes," I confirmed, bracing myself. She let go of my hand, sat back, and exhaled slowly. "All right, tell me what Sarah needs. Subpoena or not, I'll testify. I'll tell them exactly what a mess you were, how devastated you were by Robert, how completely you believed in him, how you couldn't see the truth. I'll tell them about how you just disappeared after everything fell apart, how you cut everyone off because of the shame. I can paint a very convincing picture of a woman who was a victim of a manipulative husband, not a co-conspirator. And I can make it clear you're not one to fabricate claims." A fierce, protective glint entered her eyes. "Robert won't get away with this. Not again." My sister, the fixer, was still a fixer, but her motivations had subtly shifted. She wasn't fixing my life by telling me what to do or by setting me up on online dates. It was fixing the injustice, and she was doing it by standing with me, by understanding my pain, and by offering her strength. My perception of her as simply the overachieving sibling had begun to crack, revealing a deeper loyalty and empathy I hadn't allowed myself to see. She was choosing to fight for me, and by extension, for Judy, not out of a sense of obligation, but out of a genuine desire for justice and a newfound understanding of my vulnerability. Difficult conversation, the one I had dreaded for so long, had become a bridge not just to Claire's support, but to a deeper, more honest connection between us. The legal battle stretched on for months, a grueling process of depositions, motions, and tense meetings with Sarah. Judy and I became a unit, a silent understanding passing between us, forged in the crucible of shared history and renewed purpose. We met frequently, often on the bus, commuting to Sarah's office or to the courthouse. Hum of the city, the gentle swaying of the bus, became less a soundtrack to my quiet hiding and more a rhythm of shared resolve. Claire, true to her word, was unwavering. She met with Sarah, providing detailed accounts of my financial and emotional state after the initial implosion, painting a vivid picture of a woman utterly crushed by betrayal, not a participant in a scheme. Her testimony was concise, articulate, and devastatingly effective. She spoke with a quiet intensity, not her usual boastful confidence, which made her words even more impactful. She didn't try to sugarcoat my fear or my inaction, but she framed it as a consequence of Robert's manipulation, not a sign of malice. In doing so, she managed to peel back layers of my own self-condemnation, helping me see myself through a more compassionate lens. Unexpected twist came not from Robert, but from another former employee who, after hearing about the renewed proceedings, bravely came forward with new evidence against Robert, corroborating some of Judy's earlier, seemingly unprovable claims. This new evidence, combined with our unified, honest testimony and Robert's increasingly desperate and convoluted defense, significantly weakened his appeal. His claims of a fabricated conspiracy crumbled under the weight of truth. Final resolution wasn't a sudden explosion of triumph, but a quiet, steady unraveling of Robert's lies. The appeals court rejected his motion for a new trial. He remained incarcerated, facing the additional charges, his desperate attempt to discredit Judy and escape justice having failed spectacularly. The judge's final words, read aloud in the courtroom, upheld Judy's integrity as a whistleblower and commended the individuals who had bravely stepped forward to ensure justice was served. It was listed as one of those individuals, a witness to the truth, not a guilty bystander. The label, once a brand of shame, now felt like a badge of quiet redemption. After the ruling, Judy, Claire, and I met for coffee, not in the park, but in a small, bustling cafe near the courthouse. The tension that had clung to us for months had finally lifted, replaced by a profound sense of exhaustion and quiet relief. "It's over," Claire said, stirring her latte, a tired but triumphant smile on her face. "He's finally done." Judy nodded, a rare, genuine smile gracing her lips. "I can finally breathe again, truly breathe." She looked at me. "Thank you, Judith, for everything, for facing it, for standing with me. It wouldn't have been possible without you." "And you, Judy," I said, a lump in my throat. "You gave me a chance to make things right. You pushed me when I needed it, and you accepted me despite everything." Claire reached across the table, taking both our hands. "And you too," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You taught me that sometimes the most important battles aren't fought in boardrooms or courtrooms, but in quiet conversations, facing ugly truths and finding courage when you least expect it." Her gaze settled on me. "You're not hiding anymore, Judith. You're living." My life wasn't magically perfect. Scars of the past remained, and the financial ruin was still a reality I navigated daily. My children, though aware of my involvement in the new proceedings and the outcome, were still distant, their trust not yet fully restored. That would be another, even more difficult conversation, one I knew I would have to initiate when the time was right. But something fundamental had shifted. The cold, hard knot of guilt in my stomach had loosened, replaced by a quiet strength. My mornings on the 7:15 express bus still felt like a routine, but no longer a purgatory. I still saw countless faces through the window, but I no longer feared seeing a ghost from my past. Instead, I sometimes saw Judy, heading to her new job, or Claire, on her way to a weekend visit. We were all still starting over in our own ways, but we were doing it with open eyes, with honesty, and with a resilience born from difficult conversations and unexpected alliances. The journey wasn't over, but the path ahead, though still complex, felt finally, unequivocally mine.